Thank you so much, Julian and Chris, for joining us today, and feel free to take it from here.
Thanks, Sarah. So I'm going to share my slides, but while I'm doing it, and I shared a link to the slides as well, and you can see how many tabs I have open. I'm not ashamed. But yeah, I wanted to start off and say happy pre-Earth Day. Tomorrow is Earth Day, and I hope you celebrate it in some way, some form of fashion. But as Sarah said, I work at the American Geophysical Union. So we essentially cover anything from the core of the planet to the planets and space. So we cover a lot across. So we do publish journals, but we also have we have big meetings, variety of them, but the core meeting is the AGU fall meeting that really has about 30,000 scientists attend every year. So it's pretty big, pretty big community. And my background is actually in libraries. I spent a pretty good amount of my life in libraries as well. So just to start, a lot of work has gone in at AGU to improving sort of our guidance for sharing data and software. A lot of that has to do with a position statement that we've had for a while. It goes back to 1997 for sharing data, but there's really really a lot of force. We've got a lot of support from our community for sharing data and software for a while now, but also we've recently received support from NSF to improve linking with the National Science Foundation with their PAR, which is a public access repository. So improving the links, the sharing information with regards to data, and there'll be further iterations with software as well. So that work has also sort of helped us in helping the community improve sort of the guidance, the other sort of infrastructure that needs to take place to improve this throughout other journals, other societies. So a lot of work is a lot of my work so far has been working with community in streamlining our guidance. And this is if you go to data and software for authors at AGU, that's our first iteration of sort of streamlining our guidance. We're going to work on improving it, but a lot of this information that I'm sharing today is our lessons learned from this experience. And I just wanted to highlight too, so you can see the structure of that page and what information's on it. But I wanted to highlight the help desk, and that's where a lot of the lessons learned as well are feeding into this talk. So really, one of the primary things is we really try to not parachute people into access and finding data. So this is something that happened more and more in earlier times, and we're improving. But oftentimes researchers would just say, you can find the data here, or you can find the software here, and they would include sometimes just a website, a homepage link, and that wasn't helpful. Having direct information, having additional context is very helpful for people wanting to sort of access the data and software and understand the underlying research. So it's improving. I wouldn't say you're flying steadily with a parachute, but we are working with authors to improve how they provide that information. And really, to start, one of the places where we work with them is on availability statements. And I don't say data availability statement. I say availability statement because there's much more to share. So it's additionally the software, workflows, notebooks. We want to encourage greater sharing. So we've been referring to it as availability statement. And you can see sort of the anatomy of what's in a statement, sort of the annotation, really the metadata that goes along with a citation, essentially. There's some additional information, maybe like access conditions, that's also hopefully found in the metadata. But really key to this, and this is the part where we're improving, which is early days of availability statements. Really, they're free text, right? They're unstructured information. So you would find researchers going and preserving their data, sharing a DOI, and then that being not cited, that not being actionable. So being further on discoverable in the ecosystem. So that's this in-text citation. I think that's what researchers didn't really know for a while, is that that can provide further impact and further value. And here's some templates. While we were putting together our own information for authors, we did come across other guidance sites where we had like a lot of variations of different templates, and we wanted to sort of streamline it to sort of the basic part. And again, really, it comes back to this sort of actionable, persistent identifier that we really want to drive home here, that people start using, because that is something we can act on and do more with. Sorry. So then the other part of this is sort of the anatomy of a data software citation or other two. You can see collection, computational notebook down below. And these are sort of the other things that you come to expect in a citation. I think the new part that we want to emphasize is this bracketed description. And that's actually common to at least one citation style, which is APA, where you have this bracketed description. And the interesting thing is, reason why that's important is that signals to others in the process that are sort of tagging, automated systems, others that are sort of tagging this information to make it more discoverable, that signals to them that citation is something different. It's either a data set, software, collection, computational notebook. And where do we get those tags? We get them from DataCite, actually. There's a, within the schema, there's a resource, I'm blanking on it right now, but there is an actual element in the schema that references all these different types, and we draw on that. And again, something that's very important here is, again, a persistent identifier that we're trying to, trying to guide our researchers even further. So just to give you some examples, this is what a bracketed description looks like within data citation examples, just providing you additional information here. Software in context, so you can see software, bracketed descriptions, and I should stop there and say that this is something that we as a community, and I mean other societies, publishers, people in the infrastructure community, in the Force 11, there's a Force 11 implementation group that's going to be releasing guidance that speaks to this, about improving the process further on down so that these citations are indexed properly by Crossref, and also event data is captured by DataCite. So, event data is all the citations and additional information about how your data and software is being used. So we want to sort of drive that and move that forward as well. I think at the end of the day, the dream is that, with availability statements, they're free text, right? So you can have a lot of variation. Really, we love to capture those persistent identifiers like DOIs, capture the metadata, and actually create a statement from that, really drive home improved metadata for our researchers. So if they can see the value, they see the impact when they do certain things like this. There's an example we worked on. People love examples, so you can give them templates, you can give them guidance, but like an example is really helpful. This is one where we worked with the authors to sort of improve what a statement would look like and what citations would look like. So I wanted to get to, this is really the meat of the talk, which is what we get through the help desk, all the questions we get from researchers. And a lot of them come back to what repository should I use? So in many ways, they are already using, discipline-specific repositories. They might be, using other sort of institutional repositories. But, really it comes down to when they say, what repository should I use? They're further on down the publication process, and it speaks more sometimes to the process data, the derived data that they're working on. And there's really no last minute solution for that, right? And that's where you see a lot of usage of general repositories. The one that is often used in our community is actually Zenodo. That's one that we've seen come up pretty high on our statistics. But we created with our community this list of useful repositories, and we do try to drive home the fact that you should think about your repository early on in the process. But we're seeing it that this is still a common problem. And then some other help desk challenges that I wanted to bring up here is that government sites, right? So this is another challenge, is that we in the research community, the infrastructure, the repositories know about DOIs. We know about sort of these systems for preserving data and software. But when you get to government sites, when you get to other people, other groups outside of that community, there really is no knowledge of that, and data. Really, you have to access data through a contact form. You have to request it. So it's a challenge. We can streamline only so far, right? And in some respects too, you have people working with data that has like sort of national concerns. One case is seismic data. So you could potentially use seismic data to understand where nuclear tests are going off. Firewalls, authentication, this is another challenge that we have. We stress that the data should be made available and easy access to it. But there are still a lot of systems out there. In fact, even government agencies, funders are even starting to drive home authentication as a way to sort of, work with communities on use of data. So this is an interesting space right now. Also this anonymity concern. Supplemental information is traditional, right? Like this is something that researchers are commonly used to share data, to share various things. And when you tell them, no, we're doing it this way, it throws them off. And it's part of the peer review process. So they've gotten familiar with it, and we have had to work with them on walking them through this process. FTP directories on the web, storage solutions. These are challenges, even with major institutions that we work with, they're still using these, and they don't have preservation solutions, or they do, and it takes months to develop, to mint a DOI, to preserve data or software. And that's a real drawback, right, for the publication process for that timeline. Curation, deposit workflows. I think that's a real challenge with some repositories. You can develop high quality metadata and high quality records, but at the same time, we have the friction on the other end where an author is waiting for that repository to release the data because we're waiting for that. We stress, we require availability. And so an author can wait, like in some cases we've had with repositories 2 months, 1 or 2 months. So that's a real challenge that we have to work through at the moment. And then web sharing development platforms, I think the common one here, what I was using was GitHub, but in general, we have a challenge with people not putting how they want to cite their data or software on a page where you sort of a landing page, a direct link, because that's extremely helpful for our staff, for us working on trying to improve this information. Databases also don't think about this, like how can you create more direct links, information on how to access the parameters for accessing this information. Available upon request is a cultural challenge. So you do have some authors sharing some of their data, but then they'll say, you can get the rest here and you can still talk to us. And we still have to work through that. The citation nothingness problem is one that where authors can cite other papers where they say data is available, but it's not in often cases. So I call it the citation nothingness situation. And then the website homepage, I think that's just laziness. So, and another challenge is English language. So we really want to promote other languages. I think that was one thing that when I landed, I stressed is that, you know, we can work with translations, we can work with language diversity, but initially it was sort of stressed that everything had to be in English. And I think that has to change. And then the many data links, many citations problem is a real challenge. What if you have 50, 100 of them? How do you cite those like properly? And authors don't know sometimes. They do their best and they actually put it in tables. And that is something that, again, is hard to work with in sort of a structured way that we want. So this is just a fast and furious taste of some of the big problems. And then the last one I'll mention is preserving large data. So, you know, with the sort of increase in, you know, computation, just machine learning and those kind of examples, we are experiencing an explosion, and authors don't know what they have to share. So we walk them through that process, but also they can't share all of it, right? They want to do more of a dump of data, you know, to preserve it. And when you get into the terabytes level, not too many, actually very few repositories can handle data of that size. And so that's a challenge that we have to work with as far as how do they preserve certain information. So one of the things I want to, these are sort of the big ideas that to sort of take away too from our lessons learned is that we want to do this as a community. So we don't want to just have an AGU data help desk. We want to share this with you know, with our community. So some of the services out there, libraries, you know, like data stewards, we want to work on this together. And so we want to extend an idea that comes from ESIP, AGU, EGU, AMS, other partners, where we share a help desk together, and we work together on these challenges, so we can develop guidance together and instructions. And so we're working on extending this, and if anyone's interested, I'd love to talk to you. And so this is the ESIP data help desk. This is where it's hosted and run. But also another idea is to think about, like, how can we work with authors earlier on, even before they get to submitting their manuscript to journals. And I've been thinking about how we can, you know, start reaching them earlier in the process. And so this is an idea, working with them as they're sort of writing their paper, and in conversations with a sort of startup called CurveNote, which it's a tool for authoring, you know, with Jupyter Notebooks, authoring papers. And they did something innovative, which is ask us, what are our QC, what are our rules that we ask authors? And so they actually asked them as they're writing the paper, integrated these sort of rules so that author will know before they submit the manuscript, these are things I need to check off. And so that includes the data and software. Another idea is, you know, again, like within, even before sort of the writing process, when they're you know, working with the data, doing analysis, you know, working through the sort of that process, notebooks are a really interesting approach to thinking about how we can sort of infuse best practices into the process and have them sort of share data and software related information at that point so that it's captured further on down. And so this is a project that we want to sort of elevate notebooks, as a new format, basically, and not call it a journal, but basically publish notebooks. And we call it Notebooks Now, and we're working on that right now. So if you're interested, let me know. And then the last thing is the cookie cutter approach. And this example comes from the data science community. So there are cookie cutters where you can, think about the cookie cutter that you can stamp on cookie dough and make make cookies with in different patterns. The cookie cutter is a similar fashion where you have a sort of template in a GitHub repository where you can copy it, you can fork it over to your repository, to your organization, and you can sort of use a template that has sort of information already in it to guide you. And I think this is really like an applied way. Instead of going to a guidance page with a lot of text, wouldn't it be great if you could go to a cookie cutter, use a cookie cutter and really, have more of an applied way of infusing best practices. So this is another idea that I really like, and some people in our community in geosciences have explored it. And the last thing is we really need to start showing to our authors the value of our researchers, the value of doing this work. And this example comes from PLOS. I really like it, where they created a new sort of data badge, data link that allows you sort of to filter. Hopefully, I think that's where they're going, is allows you to filter the papers that have data or have software. And I hear this from our researchers that this is one feature they'd love to have. And it's not just on the journal side. You can think about this in various places, leverage the metadata in various places like indexing services, search and discovery at your own institution as far as where you're tracking research. So really, see the impact, like that's something I think could really inspire researchers to start doing this more. Is like they could be seen doing this as opposed to others that are not. So I just wanted to come away with some of the takeaways, which is I think there are a number of repositories out there, a number of sorry, I'm skipping ahead. So the first takeaway that I had, which is we should work together to really move others forward with data sharing requirements, policies. One of the challenges we have is that we're forward thinking, and we do have authors come to us and say, oh, I have to share my data, I'm going to consider another journal. And that is not helpful when we have people sort of leaving and not sharing things in other journals. So we really need to do this as a community and do this together. Institutions, disciplinary services, I really feel need to work together. We have a dizzying array of repositories. That's the challenge that researchers face. And I think, we really need to think about how institutions can pair up or work together with discipline repositories to start streamlining this further for researchers, really share our resources together. I like the 4TU example. They're one of the institutional repositories that really stand out, in our data, and it's because they work together. They work together to share these resources, and I think it's just a great example. The other thing is we need to find better ways to integrate into the workflows, into the process, and so you saw that with the notebooks example, platforms like GitHub, and then researchers are just inundated with guidance. We need to streamline it. We're working on that to really make it easy for researchers, and part of that is connected with making the process easier as well, right? Like that they don't have to think that much about what they're doing. So kind of like a checklist approach is where we're headed to. And then we need to demonstrate to researchers the value of sharing data and software. So you heard that with the PLOS example. So leveraging the metadata that we are starting to collect, we need to demonstrate that value. Again, I'm Chris Erdman. You can reach out to me if you have any questions, and I will cede the floor to Julian.
Hey, thank you. Hi, I am Julian Schneider, and I am the Senior Bioinformatics Analyst for Sage Bionetworks, which is one of many SAGEs out there. We are a nonprofit that supports research. It's funded, much of it's funded by the National Institutes of Health, and I support two different consortia. One is an Alzheimer's consortia, and one is a mental disorders consortia. And what I do is I coordinate the outputs from all of the grants granted to these consortium members. And so I sort of shepherd the data, the software, the protocols, the notebooks, et cetera, from their labs and into our platform, which is called Synapse. So it's a homegrown platform called Synapse. So I do that for about 70 grants. And that's collecting everything from the study descriptions, the methods descriptions, acknowledgement statements, governance, data availability statements, which is a different thing. And recently, we've sort of made a big improvement on how we make our data accessible. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. Here we go. My background actually is also a librarianship. I've been a classic cataloger. I've designed bibliographic databases for Sage, for EBSCO. And I've been an academic librarian for a very long time, and now I'm in the research data management field with Sage. And data availability statements can be very challenging because there's a lot of pieces to them. All right, there we go. Oh, I hope these aren't too small. I'm going to sort of talk about an example, and this is from our Alzheimer's disease portal. The data in our portal is completely accessible. The mouse model data and the non-human data, you only need a Synapse account to access, and anyone can have one. If you want to get hold of the human data, you have to sign some governance forms, but once you sign those forms, you are able to download and reuse the data. So we are getting quite a bit of data reuse, mostly among our consortium members. But in addition to grabbing this data and getting it into a repository, I also guide the manuscript data. So generally, it's interesting. I work with the data from the time it's uploaded and then manage it as it goes through the publication process. And the interesting thing about that is all of the data that comes out of a grant or a study is not necessarily all of the data that you're going to use in a manuscript. So you're gonna see subsets. And this is a study called Fresh Micro, and it's generated a lot of interest because they're using fresh microglia taken from someone during surgery instead of using preserved brain tissue. So this has generated some interest. And this is what it looks like in Synapse. We actually have a prettier version in what we call our AD portal, but that's going to get confusing. So I'm just going to show you the sort of back end. And we've got the study description. And here's the data. And they're neat little folders, kind of separated by data types. We've got gene expression and gene variants, and we do have metadata. We ask for a lot of metadata from our contributors, including information on the individuals, which is race, ethnicity, sex, diagnosis, etc. Information on the biospecimen, which would be the organ, the area of the organ, for instance, the brain, what area of the brain, the weight of the tissue, some tissue processing information, and then information about the experiment run, the kind of assay that they use for the sample. And that would be the platform they use, and is it long read, and information like that about how this was done. If you keep clicking down, you get the individual data files. So we have all of these data files listed under these studies. And we also have the metadata files. So we have the data, and then we have these metadata files. They're Excel files, and then that metadata is actually annotated to the data files. Go back, these little tags are the annotations. So if you click on that, you get all the metadata that we've attached to the file itself. If someone says, "Oh, I'm going to publish on this," what we used to do is we would create a wiki page. We called it the manuscript landing page, and we put the information about the manuscript. We would include links to the study and the data files. We could only do it at the file level. And then we give this page a DOI, and we send them the data availability statement text, and they would, with the DOI in it. So when you click on the DOI, you come to this page. It's got information about the manuscript, and it's got information about the data and what you need to access it. This is what our data availability statement looks like. Not quite this colorful, but the pieces of it are: we have the researcher describe their data. That's in the red. We have the location of our repository, which is the AD Knowledge portal with the link to the portal. We have a description of what the repository is and how it's funded. And then we have the conditions for use and how to get access if you want access, with the link to the instructions. And then finally, we have the DOI to that manuscript landing page. So it's an okay solution. We've got a lot of the pieces of what people want to know in our data availability statement, but there's a sort of like awkward landing page situation that you link to files, but in a study, but it's not telling you exactly what subset of those files are being used, if it is, indeed a subset. And so what we've done is we've just created something called a data set. And a data set is a file view. It looks like a table, but it's a basically a collection of the data files that you can pick from any one of our studies. And it also carries over the metadata for that file. So you get the annotations as well. And here we have some samples of some of the new data sets that we've created for manuscripts. And so here's what this looks like. This is sort of the same kind of landing page where you have information about the manuscript. Here you have the DOI for the manuscript, but you have, instead of links to the study, you have this list of the actual data files. And you can see you've got some resource type links, the data type, the assay type. You have a table with all of the metadata about the data files linked to this paper. We give that the data set DOI. So this DOI is linked directly to this file view of data files. And we've got a very rich set of metadata. Here you've got the data type, the assay, cell type, the consortium, because we, for instance, if somebody does use data from a study in the Alzheimer's consortium and also finds one in our mental disorders consortium that they use, they can bring that in as well. So you can get data from different consortiums. Some more metadata: nucleic acid source, platform, read length, specimen ID. Yeah, just lots of information that you can look at even before you open the data file. And you can bring over the metadata files as well. So if you want to, say, put this in RStudio or something and really manipulate the data, you can do that without having to hunt for them. They're all in the same data table. One of the interesting challenges, though, is the data for this to work has to be in our repository. So if somebody's using data from our repository and data from somewhere else, we can link out to it, but then, you kind of lose control. It's like, well, okay, it's going somewhere else, but we have no idea possibly what that accessibility is. We even have some data, for instance, this is a lipidomic set, but it's going to this repository called Lonnie, which does, it's very protected data, and you have to go through several hoops to get access to it. So if you actually click on the download option here, what you get is you have to sign into Lonnie. Well, if you have no idea what Lonnie is, or how to get to it and sign up and go through that process, you're out of luck. So there are some real challenges still with how we're doing this, even though we've improved by creating the data set function. So the pros of this is direct link to the data. You're able to choose data from disparate studies. If it's in Synapse, you can grab those files and add it to your data set. And you have this immediate access to a very rich set of metadata. Some of the cons, it has to be in the platform. There are still access issues when we link to other repositories. There's no automatic access. So for instance, if you don't have a Synapse account, you can view these, but you can't download. So it doesn't automatically know what level of access you have if you click on that DOI. One of the other cons I was thinking about as Chris was talking is, while we do have versioning and provenance, it's not immediately evident. So you have to do a little bit of digging, but it's there. It's just not sort of machine actionable and part of this whole process, or part of the statement. Oops. I guess that was it. So those are my cons. This was basically a little case study in how we're trying to improve things. I'd say, honestly, versioning and provenance is something that we're talking quite a bit about right now, because as this data that we have is getting reused and reprocessed, et cetera, the versioning is becoming more important. And we've got a couple of cohorts that are being reused quite a bit. There's like 3 of them I can think of, and doing things like synchronizing specimen IDs, individual IDs, making sure that we can track who's reused data from what individual, and this is de-identified individuals. So you just have a like a unique number for them, but that's still challenging. And so while reuse is great, it's presenting some real challenges for us in how we coordinate that data, how we present the data when it's being used in manuscripts. And also, one of the biggest cons is I can give the author these availability statements and say, make sure you put this in your manuscript. But sometimes they don't. They make up their own availability statements that has none of this in there, and they'll just stick the DOI, in a sentence, and the rest of it, goes by the wayside. So we can't really force our authors to use our wording for these availability statements. And so it is also causing us problems when we're trying to track our impacts factors in journals, because if we don't know the language of the data availability statement that they're using, it makes the searches for that much harder. So that is my sort of quick and dirty guide through our new data set feature. And I think that is it for me.
Okay, thank you so much, Julian, and thank you, Chris, as well. I'm gonna stop the recording now. And